Welcome to the MamasteFit YouTube channel. In this workout video, we're going to be doing a pelvic floor release circuit that you can do with a foam roller. So we're going to be targeting the musculature that helps to support the pelvic floor and then also targeting the pelvic floor itself with some hip shifting as well. So the only thing that you'll need for this workout will be a foam roller. It can be whatever length works best for you. This one's pretty long, but if you have the shorter, more standard sizes, that's fine as well. So for this workout, we're gonna move through 3 rounds for about 30 seconds per side. But know that as you're moving through the workout, if you wanna spend a little bit more time in certain movements, feel free to stay there a little bit longer. We're gonna start round number 1 with a figure 4 glute release exercise. So you'll start seated on the foam roller. You're gonna bring one ankle on top of the other knee to form like this 4 figure with your legs. And then we're just gonna kind of roll forward and backwards, massaging primarily the glute of the bent leg. And so you might find some points that feel like a little bit more sticky, and you can spend a little bit more time kind of rocking back and forth in that little area, or you can do more big sweeping motions. And if you do find like a sticky point that feels like it needs a little bit more work, you can kind of pause, do a little bit of rocking back and forth, and then stop, and then take like a deep breath and think, breathe into that area, and then exhale, let go. And let's go ahead and switch to the other side. So bring the other ankle on top of your knee, and then we're just gonna kind of do that same massaging through that bent leg glute. So you're gonna roll through that glute, find any kind of sticky points, pause, kind of wiggle, and rock a little bit more. And then just either taking really big sweeping motions or really small motions. And so the glute musculature is one of the first things that helps to support our pelvic floor. And sometimes if it's a little clenched or tight, it can make it a little hard for our pelvic floor to work. And let's go ahead and move on to the second exercise. The next exercise is going to be adductor release exercise. So it's going to be releasing the inner thigh. And so it's going to be up to you to kind of find a position that feels most accessible to you. So if you're pregnant, you may not be able to find more of the supine position. And so the first way that you can do this is you can come into more of that like Sphinx pose where your bottom leg is down on the floor and then the other leg is up on top of that foam roller. And then you're just gonna roll to kind of massage the inner thigh. And in this position, my belly is off of the floor. So if you are pregnant, but your belly is maybe not very big, you can maintain this position. If that doesn't feel super accessible to you, you can bring the other knee in, so there's a lot more space for your belly, and then you can rock and roll through that as well. So choose whatever variation feels best for you. So you're gonna roll through. Again, if you find any like sticky points, feel free to stop there and kind of wiggle and rock through a little bit. Maybe you lift the ankle up and roll through. Maybe you drop the ankle beyond the foam roller, so we have a little bit more external rotation. So you can kind of play around with which one feels like a little bit more like triggery to you, or you need to spend like a little bit more time. You can adjust like where the foam roller is sitting, so you get a little bit higher in thigh or a little bit lower. And let's go ahead and switch sides. So choose the same variation that felt good for you on the other side that felt accessible with your belly if you are pregnant. And then same thing, we're gonna kind of roll through. Trying to find any sticky points, spend a little bit more time kind of wiggling, rocking through there. And if you need to, adjust the position of the foam roller so it's a little bit higher on the thigh. And then we could play around with like ankle position. Maybe the ankle's a little bit higher. Maybe it drops down a little bit more. And you can find what feels best for you. A few more seconds here. And we'll go ahead and move on to our third exercise. So for our third exercise, we're going to be doing a hip shifted movement with the foam roller. So this is going to help with your pelvic positioning, which is going to be really important for that pelvic stability and pelvic floor release. And so you're going to start with the foam roller pressing into your wall or a stationary structure and to the inside of the outside leg. And so you're going to press into it. So you're going to feel that inner thigh turn on a little bit more. So you're first going to start by opening up towards your wall. And then you're gonna rotate the pelvis forward to open towards the opposite wall or the other side of the room for you. So the movement is not just happening in my thoracic or my upper body. So you wanna make sure it's the pelvis that is moving, not just the rib cage. So you're gonna rotate forward and backwards when you rotate forward, you're going to feel more of a stretch through this glute and hamstring. When you open up, you may feel a little bit more of like an inner thigh, like groin type stretch. So we're going to rotate back and forth. And then each round, we're going to progress this a little bit more to add a little bit more movement, to change the way we're coming into this hip shifted position. So what this is doing is this is rotating the pelvis on top of the femur, which is helping with that internal to external rotation of the pelvis, which is going to help with pelvic stability and pelvic floor release. Let's go ahead and switch sides. So facing the other direction, press your inner thigh into the foam roller. So outside leg is pressing into it. And then we're going to open up towards the wall that you're pressing into, and then rotate the pelvis to open up towards the opposite wall. So we're going to rotate back and forth, really focusing on the movement where the pelvis rotates forward. So that inner hip is moving and it's changing distance and displacement as we move. So it's not just maintaining its position as your torso rotates. This inner hip is actually shifting forward and is shifting backwards. And so again, this is rotating the pelvis on that femur. So this outer hip, you should feel like there's a lot of movement that's occurring. So moving on to round number 2, back to our glute exercise. We're going to find that figure 4, and we're just going to roll and move around to find any points that feel like a little bit more sticky. So similar as before, if you do find a sticky point, just kind of pause and rock back and forth. But you can do big sweeping motions, or you can do really small motions depending on what feels good for you. And then go ahead and switch to the other side. So bring the other leg onto the knee, and then we're going to roll back and forth. Again, feeling for any of those sticky spots that you maybe want to spend a little bit more time. About 10 more seconds here, and then we'll move on to the adductor release foam roller movement. And let's move on to the adductor exercise. So again, choosing the position that felt most accessible to you. You can either come where the bottom leg is straight, or you can bring the bottom leg in if that feels more comfortable for you. And then play around with your ankle position, whether you want the ankle a little bit higher or a little bit lower. And then begin to roll through it and kind of explore what feels good for you, what you feel like needs a little bit more of a release, a little bit more time on. And then again, if you need to, you can kind of adjust where the foam roller starts to adjust where you are rolling out. Let's go ahead and switch sides. So moving on to the other side now, and again, you could play around with the ankle position and then roll around again. Find any sort of sticky points or parts that feel like you need a little bit more attention. If you do, to spend a little bit more time kind of rocking in that little spot, and then you can adjust the foam roller position as well. And so you may notice that like one inner thigh or one glute feels like a lot more tender or tight than the other. And that's pretty normal. Like, we are asymmetrical, so our muscles have different levels of balance and tightness to them. It doesn't mean that there's an issue. If you are having like pelvic pain or pelvic floor issues, then yes, that could be associated with an issue, maybe due to asymmetry. But it's just something to be aware of. Like, it's okay if it's not perfectly aligned. Moving on to our hip shifted exercise with the foam roller. So it's going to be the same setup. I'm going to press my leg into that foam roller. So inner thigh is pressing in, and then I'm going to take my back leg, step it over, and I'm going to bend in that inside leg, which is going to rotate my pelvis forward. So that inner thigh is shifting forward and bring me more into this hip. I'm going to sit back into this hip, going to feel more of a stretch in that glute and hamstring, and then slightly round in my back. And then from here, I'm just going to breathe. So I'm going to take a big inhale. Exhale, let go. Big inhale, think towards the back side of your pelvic floor, towards like your butt area or your back. So big inhale into your back. And then exhale, I want you to think like the front half of your pelvic floor and your belly are kind of lifting up and in. So the back half of your pelvic floor lengthens with your inhale, and with your exhale, the front half of your pelvic floor lifts up and in. So for a lot of us, the back half tends to have a little bit more tension, while the front half tends to have a little bit more length. And so by focusing on the length towards the back and the shortening to the front, it can help with that pelvic balance. A few more breaths here. And let's go ahead and switch sides. So placing the other knee into that foam roller, I'm gonna step my back leg forward, bend in that knee, so I'm shifting into that outside hip. So that inside hip is rotating forward. You should feel a big stretch in that glute and hamstring. And then same thing, breathe into your back. Exhale to lift the front half of the pelvic floor and belly to spine. So think lengthen the back half of your pelvic floor, like your butt area, and then exhale to lift up in the front half of your pelvic floor, think belly to spine. A few more breaths here. Moving on to round number 3, back to our glute release exercise. So come into your figure 4 position, and then we're just gonna kind of roll around and massage that glute. If you found keeping like both hands down on the floor was kind of limiting your range of motion, feel free to just keep one hand down, add some balance, and this is gonna allow you to have like a lot more range with that glute. You can also like roll a little bit more to the side and see how that feels. And like more like the side glute area, you can roll more to like a seated position. So just kind of feel around for what feels a little bit more tender, and release it. You can put one weight into one hand, so you can do a little bit more of like the side glute area, just kind of massaging through there. If you want, you can maintain more of that seated position. It's about whatever just feels good for you. So we're releasing tension on the glute musculature. Sometimes if they're too tight, especially like on one side versus the other, it can make it a little bit hard for the pelvic floor to work. So releasing glute tension can sometimes support pelvic floor release as well. Moving on to our adductor release movement. So choose a movement that feels good for you. Come into your supine or your child's pose. And then we're just gonna roll through that inner thigh. If you want to adjust the ankle position, feel free as well. I usually find lifting my ankle helps me find a little bit more of a release in my adductor muscle. And then again, adjust the foam roller if you want it a little bit higher, because otherwise you're going to end up like on the other side of the room rolling around with this guy. The adductor muscles also are really important to supporting the pelvic floor. And so if they're really tight or imbalanced or potentially like weak, it could affect the way the pelvic floor can function. The adductors are also really important for pelvic stability. They're like a key muscle involved in a lot of the myofascial slings. Go ahead and switch sides. And the myofascial slings help with pelvic stability. So it's slings of fascia and tissue and muscles that help to compress the pelvic joints, help to stabilize it during movement. And the adductors are involved in several of the slings. And so releasing tension or uneven pull in the adductors can be really beneficial for like pubic symphysis pain, pelvic stability towards the front of the pelvis, and then also helping with like post C-section or even like diastasis healing. So let's move on to our final exercise and conclude this pelvic floor release workout. So moving back to our hip shifted exercise, we're gonna place the inner thigh into that foam roller and stir it by facing that wall. And then I'm gonna step over the foam roller as I come into that hip shifted position like we did in round number 2. I'm gonna step back to find that open hip position, and then step the leg forward to find that same hip shifted position. take a breath here, and then go back. So we're moving very slow through this. We're not trying to get like as many reps as possible. We want to feel ourselves come out of the hip shift and then move back into that hip shifted position. The hip shift is where we're going to have more of a release in the back half of the hip shifted pelvic floor. So the back half of my outer leg is going to be releasing a little bit more in that pelvic floor area. So step forward and then back, and let's go ahead and switch sides. So place the other knee into the foam roller. I'm going to start by facing towards that wall, and then bring the leg forward, shift into that hip, and then step back forward to find that open hip. Step over, shift, and then step back to open. And again, you can come forward and take a full round of breath here, and then step back. But what we're focusing on is being able to move into that hip shift and then move out of it. About one more here. And this concludes our pelvic floor release workout with a foam roller. So we focused on releasing the glute musculature, the inner thigh musculature, two areas that can really influence our pelvic position. And so if we have an uneven pole, because one side's a little bit tighter, it can influence the way that our pelvis is positioned, which can then influence our pelvic floor tension. We finish up with a hip shift exercise, which is going to help you move the pelvis coming into that internally rotated to externally rotated position within the pelvis. And this is a great movement to incorporate to help with pelvic stability. If you're pregnant, it's wonderful to help prepare for birth because it helps to open the lower half of the pelvis, where a lot of us tend to have a little bit more issues during pregnancy and during labor. And so incorporating hip shifted exercise can be super beneficial throughout your pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. If you liked this workout and it was super helpful for you and felt really good to do, be sure to comment below to let us know how it felt and then what other workouts you're hoping for from us. Again, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We release 1 to 2 new workout videos every week and 1 to 2 educational videos every week in addition to our podcast. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you had a great workout and you're feeling a little bit more loose and relaxed, and we'll catch you next time.